Welcome back. This is Silver here, with the second chapter of my fanfiction, Rollie, Vita, and the Sorcerer's Stone. I won't keep you. Please enjoy. Chapter 2. Fated for Love. For 3 years, the savior of the magical world slept in the cupboard under the stairs, and he didn't even know his own name. They just called him Boy or Freak. He was to clean behind them and do yard work only in the back, since they didn't want the neighbors to see. The young boy was clever and learned quickly how to be as invisible as possible. He'd get his work done and hide in his cupboard as soon as he was done, and that got him in the least amount of trouble. The boy was most interested in staying out of trouble because trouble hurt. He'd managed to finally figure out how to keep from getting hit, at least from the adults. He couldn't avoid the yelling or the ugly red look his fat uncle always got on his face upon seeing him, and his cousin Dudley still hit him. His days were mostly the same. He never was able to leave the house except to take care of the backyard. He hardly ever saw any other people. He was sure no one else knew he was a living thing in there. He cleaned up the kitchen after each meal and Dudley's eating area in front of the television. He kept up the garden in the back all day every day, and he desperately tried to avoid Dudley, which wasn't too hard because he was much skinnier and faster than that fat lump. He was hid from the world, and he didn't know life wasn't supposed to be this way. Luckily for him, one seemingly fate-driven day, a neighbor glanced into the Dursley home. They saw through a slightly open curtain of the front window just in time to see Petunia lock the small child with wild black hair under the stairs. As any good Samaritan should, they immediately called the police, and Child Protective Services arrived. Harry was taken away, and one look through the house made it impossible for him to be brought back there. They arrested the adults of the household and temporarily gave Dudley to his Aunt Marge, but they weren't locked up for very long, able to return home and sigh in relief of getting rid of Harry, upset with themselves that they didn't think of giving away the freak a long time ago. Though the little green-eyed boy had yet to find a reason to smile, he instinctively knew that this was his chance for something different. His only memorable experience was living with the Dursleys. He wasn't sure if there was better, but being taken away for being treated as he was gave him a sign things were in fact going to get better. He knew from a bit of TV he was able to hear from the cupboard there could be something better. It was his 5th birthday when he was adopted. Though he didn't think the children's home was so bad, there were lots of nice kids and 3 meals a day. Mr. Potter's new family was the Vitas, Amber and Allison, 2 mums when he used to have none. And as bad as it once felt, that is how good it became. The Vitas were full of heart, extremely normal, non-magical people. They had spent the past few years getting vetted for adoption and searching through children's homes for their missing piece. Amber's mother died when she was a young girl, about 12. She continued to yearn for that connection. Her father was abusive and expected her to take care of the household in her mother's place. She escaped with her one true love when her blue eyes met the emerald green at university. They were missing that something in their lives. They'd settled their careers and had a well-to-do life and home. When they showed up at the children's home and saw Harry there, was an instant connection and overwhelming feeling of love. "Harry." Amber was met with silence. He hadn't said much since they'd taken him home. The couple knew he was for them, though. The new parents knew he hadn't known his name until he got to the home, because his only family called him names and abused him. As soon as they walked through the door, Allison gathered the cute green-eyed small for his age boy up in a hug, and knew from her own childhood she could explain best. Even for a 5-year-old, he'd be smart enough to understand. "My boy." Harry looked up into her green eyes that were like his but not quite. "Your name is Harold James Potter. I don't think you really know that. Is that true?" Harry shook his head. "Well, it is. But that's associated with those other people, so what if we think of you a name for your new family with us? You never have to go back there, or to the home. We will care for you now," Allison continued gently, rubbing circles on his back as she held him near. Tears of happiness started to form in his eyes. Amber continued. We love you already, and we want you to feel safe with us. That's right, Allison followed up. So you can have our last name, which makes you our family. Your first new name is Vita. Can you understand letters? Amber asked, and Harry nodded. Perfect. His new blonde mummy got out a paper. That's Vita, a very easy name. It belongs to you too now. What about a nickname from your given name, like Hal? Allison suggested to the messy, raven-haired boy. He frowned a little. Okay, no. What about Roll? He instantly shook no and frowned slightly. But Amber, hearing that, thought of the perfect addition. You know what would be so sweet? Rollie Vita. She finished definitively, and Allison and Harry, or now maybe Rollie, both gasped a little. He smiled. He liked having a name that was created by his new family. Rollie thrived with Amber and Allison, or as he knew them, his mama and mum, respectively. They smothered him with all the love he'd been missing. Because he had moms, he'd noticed when anyone was being mean or homophobic and stood up for them. As time went by, the house was filled with photos of the threesome laughing, dancing, and newly fashioned Rollie getting his hair tousled as they laughed about it never being tamed. Pictures of Rollie learning to ride a bike, holding a boa constrictor, and speeding down slides at the park waving at his mums. Pictures showing the past 5 years of joy that the family went through, finally having each other and everything they all wanted. A few years ago, they finally gave up on straightening the 10-year-old's raven hair. How about you grow it out? Suggested Amber. The weight should help it lay down. She laughed after trying to comb it for the 100th time. Rollie's eyes got big at the prospect. He'd be like a rock star. He grew it that summer after his 8th birthday. Over time, he decided shoulder length was good. Like his sensei, he could keep it in a short ponytail. Not long enough to grab. As normal Muggle kids do, he had many activities outside of school, including but not limited to Latin, a few various kinds of martial arts. Plus, his star was rising in track and field. He was very fit and active, popular, especially with the girls, highly observant and a great listener. Rollie was a strong, compassionate young boy, filling out and growing tall due to all his wonderful care. Highly intelligent, learning programming from his mom and art and simple healing from his mama. He wanted to emulate them and didn't find anything they tried to teach him too difficult. He was determined to keep their love. Those things they loved, he did as well. He was their little man, a protector. How was your day, dear? Amber asked the young man that came through the door and threw his bag on the coat hanger. Mama, it was wonderful and tiring, Harry said enthusiastically with a fake huff. He loved every second of his life. It was after 5 in the afternoon and he was just getting back from his after-school activities. Oh, really? What was so tiring and what was so wonderful? Allison came along and joined the conversation from her office just off the kitchen in their spacious 5-bedroom home on the edge of Crawley. Well, I was running between my language course and jiu-jitsu when I saw something very odd, like a floating pin or something. It was super odd, but wonderful in a way. I ran after it for about a mile, but it always kept out of my reach, so tiring and wonderful. A bit of an anomaly. That is exciting. You're absolutely sure you saw that? Amber's doctor mind kicked in and she was a little concerned and maybe she should get her boy a brain scan. Yes, very sure. Clear as anything else in my path. I would have studied it more if I could have caught it, but at the end of me giving chase, it flew up out of my sight. Maybe someone's playing a trick on me. It was strange, Rollie pondered. Well, experiencing strange things may be wonderful. Quite a compelling afternoon you've had. I'm inordinately glad you're home, my love. Amber came and hugged him and cupped his face, kissing his cheek aggressively, as if he was a little one still. Rollie didn't mind though. He would never tire of feeling loved. Alison wouldn't be left out and gathered both of them in a group hug. "As am I, dear. I'm glad you had an interesting day. Dinner should be ready very soon." "Oh, can I help, Mum?" Rollie was always enthusiastic about creating in the kitchen. Alison shook her head but smiled. "Not today, hon. You clean up and do any homework you have. You can help me this weekend, or make something yourself if you like." "Oh, I saw this girl reading a book in the park. She had big bushy hair. The kids were bullying her, so I helped her, I think. She ran off after, so I'm not sure." "That sounds like Hermione. I've been her doctor for years now. What were they doing?" Amber recognized that description instantly. "They were taunting her about reading in the park instead of playing, and about her hair and teeth, I guess." Rollie shrugged, but felt bad that she ran away before he could make sure she was okay. "That's awful. What'd you do?" Alison asked from the stove. "I went over and just told them to leave her alone. And what does it matter what she does in the park? Why does it even bother them? She can do as she likes if she isn't hurting anyone. And they are, so they should stop. I was calm about it. I didn't yell or anything. I think that makes it more intimidating." "Yes, that was excellently handled. I'm sorry she ran before you could check on her. I could arrange a meeting with her if you'd like. I know her parents," Amber praised and suggested. "That would be wonderful, Mama. You know me so well." Rollie smiled, ducked his head, and rubbed his left hand through his raven hair. He went off to wash up in the bathroom for dinner, having finished his homework before leaving school. Amber smiled at Alison from the kitchen counter, and she moved to continue the meal. "His name is perfect, my dear. I looked up what it means today, and you won't believe it." Alison turned from the stove, giving her full attention. "Renowned in the land to rejoice in life, Mr. Rollie J. Vita. He's a beautiful soul. I couldn't possibly love him more. But I do, every day." "Agree. I love him more every day, and always will, as much as I love you, baby." Amber chuckled and winked. Secretly, the green-eyed wonder was broadly smiling hidden in the hole, and a tear fell as he continued to go get cleaned up. The next week, Amber called up the Grangers to have Rollie and Hermione meet. They explained that Rollie saw her in the park and thought it'd be nice to have her as a friend, not wanting to say anything about the bullying to embarrass the brown-eyed girl. The Grangers agreed enthusiastically, since their girl didn't seem to have any friends from what they could tell. She invited the Grangers for one of Alison's famous Italian dinners, famous in the Vita household anyway. Rollie also got to help so he could try to impress his new friend. He hoped. The Grangers were very prompt, and Amber let them in since the other two were still in the kitchen finishing up. The table was already set. They liked to serve their meals fresh and hot. The shy bookworm noted Rollie in the kitchen, and her breath caught, and her eyes went wide as she remembered he was the boy who helped her in the park. Her parents hadn't said what the dinner was about. She blushed a little, worried about how the night would go. She was grateful to him for sure, but she'd never met a nice kid, especially not a boy. He had helped her, though, so she felt she owed it to him to try and get to know him. Not that she had a choice. Her parents made her come here. Amber showed them to the dining room and their seats. Bread was on the table, and spaghetti and meatballs was brought in by Rollie. "This handsome devil is our son Rollie. Rollie, Alison, this is Emma and Daniel Granger, and their daughter Hermione." Rollie sat down the food and waved. Alison went over and shook the Granger's hand. They all sat down to the meal. They all had a very good chemistry. All four adults were in the medical field of sorts. Hermione was sat next to Rollie, and she was keeping quiet. After dinner, Rollie took her to his room so they were away from the ears of the adults. Not that either was ashamed to speak in front of their loving parents. "Hermione, I apologize for all this pretense. This was really about me checking if you were okay. I have a thing where I must finish what I start. I didn't want my mama to tell your parents about those kids bothering you in case you didn't want them to know. But it was true, what she said about me wanting to be friends. We live pretty close to each other, and if you're interested, I'd like to be friends." Rollie started as soon as they entered his room. Hermione was listening and looked around at his amazing room. He had a full wall of bookcases with a wide variety of books, some very advanced for a 10-year-old. She couldn't believe someone who seemed like her in a love of books wanted to be friends with her. He already showed his consideration for her and saved her from those bullies. Rollie stayed patient and let her think about it and just awaited her response. I thank you for what you did for me at the park. I'm sorry I ran off. I just hate for people to see me cry, so I had to leave for that reason. You're the first person that ever sincerely asked to be my friend. At least, I hope you are sincere. You seem to like books like me, if your room says anything about you. I'd love to be friends. Hermione finished, tensing for a joke. Wonderful. I understand wanting privacy for some things. I do love to read. My mamas are very smart, and they adopted me. I wanted to be just like them, so they wouldn't get rid of me. Hermione teared up a little, happy to have a first real friend, but also in sympathy for what Rollie just told her. Don't worry. I'm not worried about that now. But I did gain a love of reading and learning and discovery and information. I take lots of after-school activities, physical stuff, so I keep balance. That's important in our family, balance. I know you're still worried. I can tell these things. Don't be. We'll be friends as long as you want to be. Hermione nodded. They talked about similar books they'd read and had a very intellectual conversation. They didn't go to the same primary school, but they were close enough to share some after-school activities. Hermione would ask her parents that night and ended up in Latin, at least, and joined Rollie in his running training anyway. She thought it was a very good idea to have balance. She wouldn't just be one thing because Rollie was so impressive. Over the next few months, she learned he was a musician. He played drums, piano, and guitar, and was working on the violin. He knew German, French, and Spanish, and was working on Latin. He was a track star at his school and in the city. He was a top student at his school and had tons of friends. Everyone loved him, yet he still made time for her. He was deep, a thinker, practiced meditation, and had a quiet strength. He was unbelievable as a person. Sometimes she would almost get intimidated, but he was so kind and caring she couldn't. Rollie learned that Hermione loved to read, and she was the top student in her school. She had an eidetic memory and an analytical mind. To him she was beautiful and had wild, untamable hair, which made her very cool in his eyes. Once she opened up, she had an amazing sense of humor, and she looked out for others without them even knowing. He felt her care for him and appreciated her, because although everyone loved him, it was a surface kind of relationship. She was his first close friend. Really, she was becoming his best friend. So that year, Rollie was very excited about his birthday party due to having a best friend to invite. Although he had tons of friends, his entire class, and some outside his year, they were fans really, more than friends. He decided on a water park that had slides and water sports on a lake, a perfect event for his summer birthday. Oh, Rollie, I'm not very athletic, especially not in public. Hermione buried her head in her lap after coming over, getting her invite. Rollie placed his hand on her shoulder so she would look at him. You're funny. Are you kidding me? You run with me for miles 3 times a week for over 6 months now. Have you forgotten? His green eyes filled with mirth. Hermione couldn't help but smile. I couldn't possibly forget. At the start I nearly died. But you've hit your stride now. Water sports should be no problem. Hermione hesitated a few seconds before nodding. I have to have my best friend there. You'll be brilliant. I'll be right beside you. He pulled her up into a quick one-armed hug and twirled her around until she laughed breathlessly. The brown-eyed girl was used to speed now, spending all her spare time with him and the active things he loved to do. They did things she liked too. They had their own private book club and often delved into mystery solving. Rollie, of course, was right. Hermione had the most fun she'd ever had at his party and never had to leave his side. Still, she worried about what would happen once she had to leave. She'd gotten quite an unexpected letter almost a year ago. The one thing she wasn't allowed to tell him about. The one thing she was most anxious about and couldn't learn more about until this summer. That's the end of this chapter. Thanks for listening.